This is going to be our fourth Kubrick.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've talked about them all then. Kidding.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one.
You did 2001, right?
Yes. 2001 in reverse order. I think 2001 was the most recent. Either that or Eyes Wide Shut, and The Shining.
Nice.
Yeah, which are three of my top four favorite Kubrick movies.
Yeah, and then now Spartacus is number one, right?
It is not.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is way more than we usually get into before I say I don't know how to start the show yet. So it'll either be something like whatever that was, or something along the lines of "Welcome to Late to the Movies." My name is Ben Holt, and this is a podcast where my friends and I get to fill in our movie blind spots. Each week, we pick a film that either I or a guest hadn't seen before and really should have told the Romans they're Spartacus by now. This week, we're doing Spartacus. 1960s Spartacus.
1960. 60 with a bullet.
Our last episode was a 1963 film, so if I messed that up, that's why. Guest, left, right, across your podcast style, Patrick's here.
Hey.
Hey.
Great to be back, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back. So your episodes now, we were like, when Brady comes on, he sort of retraces the arc of the episodes he's been on.
Yeah. So first one was
I was gonna say it's not a direct at least from your last one to this one, it's a bit different. Though both epic.
Yeah.
Epic road movies.
This is yeah. Well, my first one was Moonlight with Brady and yourself. You're the common thread between these. Isn't that weird how that works? And then after that was that New Nightmare? Was that the second one that we did?
It might have been.
And then it was Sam Neill-Ween. And we did oh God, I can't even remember the name of the movie. Daybreakers.
Not Spring Breakers.
And then this is number 4, right? I didn't miss one, did I?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But this is, I always forget, I always forget. It's movies I've done before.
Well, because you've done a bit at this point.
Yeah. There's someone recently that I was like, oh, and this is the first time we're ever talking about this person. And I was forgot, like, oh no, this is the fourth time we're talking about that person. There's a lot of people in this movie we haven't talked about before. But before we get there, have you seen anything good recently?
Ooh, I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was on, but we've been
It's Sword and Sandals Month. I keep forgetting to say that.
Oh, you're good.
We're doing Swords and Sandals.
Sword and Sandals, a genre I didn't really know how to name for it.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, maybe that's a blind spot for me, but
this is chock full of both. It's also got tridents,
lots of sandals, lots of swords,
the Thracian dagger or whatever.
Yeah.
A net, I guess. A net.
Great net scene.
Yeah,
we'll
great
get into
net
that
scene.
in a bit.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. I don't know if I mentioned this. I started watching The Terror, AMC's show that's on Netflix.
You haven't mentioned that to me yet, I don't think.
I like it a lot. We're almost done. My wife and I are almost done with the first season. Kind of like a moody 19th century Arctic explorer passage. Kind of gets stuck in the ice. And there may or may not be some supernatural happenings out and about with the Inuit folks that are kind of living in the Arctic. Sorry, gotta enunciate that. Other than that, watch anything good. Baby time does not allow for a lot of movie time.
Break it up.
Yeah, break it up with other stuff. Watch a lot of trash, So I wouldn't say it's good, and I don't know if I want to put this on record, but I watched a couple seasons of Love is Blind before I was like, I can't watch this anymore. My mind is mush.
Which seasons? We've actually talked about Love is Blind extensively on this podcast before.
Season 1, 2, and 3. I didn't see all of season 1. I came into it in the middle as my wife was watching it. And she...
wow. You still got hooked even though they were out of the pods by then. Interesting.
Yeah, well, my wife caught me up to speed. She did a good job of that. And so season 3 came along and it was a slog to get through, and I felt my brain becoming gravy. And so I was like, I gotta kind of stop watching this.
Who's on season 3? I think that one's pretty bad.
Was it Brennan and Alexa?
Okay. Okay, sure.
And then Raven and SK.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
That one is not a good season.
No, it sucked. It was awful, man.
That one's bad.
And I was like,
I think that's one of the Texas seasons, and the Texas seasons are
Dallas. Bad. I was like, wow, this is about as bad as I'm. Sorry if you're a listener from Texas.
Yeah, Brendan's okay.
Brendan turned out to be a domestic abuser.
God, this always happens.
That's what I was like.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different
No. You're thinking of the same. Like they had a kid, and I was like looking up. Yeah. I shamefully went on the subreddit, and I was like,
it's a good subreddit.
I was like, first of all, I was like, oh my God, this is one of the subreddits where everybody is like a teenager or a 20-year-old talking about this. Different tenor of conversation than some of the other subreddits I'm on. But I was like, reading up about it, and everybody's like, oh, he has a domestic violence charge like months before this started airing.
Oh my God. And
I was like, okay.
It was, they bring him back a lot too.
Yeah,
as like even recently, as they've started bringing previous cast members onto reunions to be like check-ins and stuff, and they're always like, "Hey, they're doing great. Check out
they
their
had
baby.
a kid. Look at that."
Yeah,
also like, I mean, it was one of those things where we watched them fairly quickly, and then it was like, oh yeah, reality TV is like bad for you, and also like the ethics of it are highly questionable, and it was just like it's also like it's the type of thing that you could just have on and not pay close attention to. So that was needed at the time, but now we've kind of corrected course and we're back to watching films like Spartacus in 3 separate sittings because we got a one big chunk done yesterday, and then this morning was a little shoddy. So
my experience watching it was I watched the first almost half, I guess. I watched over an hour and a half of it before I had to log on to a virtual D&D night yesterday. And I was like, I got home from work and I was like, I'll just watch as much as I can and I'll only have a little bit left afterwards. And like, we're wrapping up. It's almost 9:30. It's like, guys, I still have almost 2 hours left of this movie I have to watch. An hour and a half only gets me, I think where I stopped it, I still had an hour and 51 minutes to go.
Yeah. I was
like, come on.
Yeah, I made it to like pretty much right before the intermission last night.
Nice.
And then today was like, we had our dishwasher broke. People stuff, human stuff.
Yeah. It lends itself to some breaking. It gives you that.
I mean that
nice freeze frame of Kirk Douglas in the intermission.
Yeah. Hey, I didn't see the freeze frame on Prime. You saw a freeze frame?
Yeah.
We just had a black screen on Prime.
It says intermission, and then it had like a still of Kirk Douglas, and then it went black for a while.
I did not see the still of Kirk Douglas.
I don't think it was up very long. I was so confused.
That might have been just a glitch in the Prime Matrix.
Maybe it was. Maybe it was. So even though the film on Prime is over 3 hours long, you still have... I think it's 8 minutes or so before the
overture
movie starts.
And an intermission. And so you got some musical sequences.
Long, but I mean, very nice looking, but long Saul Bass intro sequence.
Yeah.
So I think it's 8 minutes and change before like a action is on screen.
Yeah. And then the first action, not to get into the movie already, apparently wasn't even directed by Kubrick.
No, apparently the first like almost 20 minutes.
No,
10 minutes or something.
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Yeah. Is the guy that got fired.
Anthony Mann.
Yes. Well, we can turn. I've seen Challengers since the last time I recorded. And it's,
that's right.
It's good. I know people who like it a lot, and they'll be on soon. I'll talk to them too.
Nice. I did not.
I was going to say,
I did not see Challengers.
Yeah, I liked it. I like Lucas' stuff. He's got another movie coming out at the end of this month that is not getting good reviews.
What is it?
It's called Queer. Daniel Craig's in it.
Okay.
And it's it's not getting great reviews right now, which is interesting because I feel like the critical reception for Challengers is really high, even though it's pretty weird. But I don't know. Sometimes good movies don't get good reviews. Yeah.
That doesn't mean. I mean, it's like leave it. Go see it anyways. If somebody has a proven track record, it's worth probably seeing, even if it's getting banned. In my opinion,
or if somebody has like a Showcase Theaters membership and they gotta go see a movie anyway.
Yeah, or if you're going to $5 Tuesdays, you could do that.
There you go. Anyway, yeah, let's get into the movie. It's the movie's over 3 hours long, so we should at least give a good chunk of the podcast to it.
Yeah.
I had not seen Spartacus before.
I have not seen Spartacus
Nor
before
am I
either.
Spartacus.
I am not Spartacus either.
I don't know, crucifixion. I would just be like, I mean,
It's that guy.
if he's
The butt
also,
chin.
yeah, come on, yeah,
What does he look like? The butt chin.
Crassus. No one believes you that you don't remember what this guy looks like. He looks insane. No one has ever looked like this guy.
except Michael Douglas.
Yeah, but even he looks like a societally acceptable version of this guy.
A watered down version
Yeah.
of Kirk Douglas. Yes.
Yeah. Until like watching all of Spartacus, I've never really had a sense of how sort of shrunken Michael Douglas feels to me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a lot of these crazy angular features of Kirk Douglas that is sort of put into like a normal body.
Yeah. The whole time watching it too, I have not seen Paths of Glory, and it's been on my list of like movies I want to watch for a long time. And I just kept thinking like, man, this guy looks like a soldier.
Yeah.
Or like a cop. Which like fits with this. Like he's a gladiator, I suppose. But like I was like, man, he looks like he was born to play in Paths of Glory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a look that guy has, though.
Yeah.
It's
They don't make him
something.
like him anymore.
No, or before this. Before we get too deep into it, how would you feel about a 1-minute plot summary?
So I'm going to cheat
Yeah,
with the
please.
plot summary.
Please do.
Because number of years ago, like 2014, I want to say 2013, maybe, I went to TIFF to go to Stanley Kubrick exhibit, and long story that I can get into because it's kind of funny. Went with a friend of mine, mutual friend that went to undergraduate with me. She and I went. She's very nice, but a little bit all over the place. And she drove and had like a quarter of a tank of gas. I was living in Buffalo at the time.
Oh, okay.
Toronto's
Much closer to Toronto.
Toronto's like an hour and a half away, right? So she had like a quarter tank of gas or a half tank of gas, and that'll factor into the story later. I'm not going to take too much time to go into this, but she was pretty broke at the time. We were like undergrad or just out of undergrad. We didn't have a ton of money, but we wanted to go see this exhibit. We go up and like, she's like what will I say? How will I put this? Like a girly girl, she likes to kind of, a flirty friend. I will put it that way. It's all in good fun, but like, she definitely was like expecting me to pay for things. And I'm like, we're just friends. And I was like, and so this is getting off track real quick, but it was a great exhibit. It was a lot of fun. She had like no money for gas even. And on the way back, her gas light came on, and we were in like, maybe we were around like Hamilton, still like 40 minutes from Buffalo plus possible Peace Bridge traffic. And I was like, we should stop and get gas. And she was not having any of it. She thought we were going to make it. And this was like late at night, probably like 11, whatever. So a lot of gas stations were closed. And I was like, I am not going to get stuck on the Peace Bridge because you did not get gas. Lo and behold, we stopped and got gas, got over the Peace Bridge. Everything was fine. Later on, I found out she was not happy that I asked for us to get gas. Still stand by. Probably should have filled up the tank.
I think so, yeah.
Probably like it's a fine thing. I happily paid for it because I don't want to walk over the Peace Bridge.
Yeah.
A couple months later, we have like a Secret Santa thing. She always had a Christmas party, and at the exhibit at TIFF, I bought the Kubrick book for her. She said she'd pay me back, never paid me back. And then she gifted me the book for Christmas. So this summary comes from the book. She's a nice person. We were young. I don't hold it against her. It's just a funny story.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I could get more into it, but I'm not going to. Spartacus, a rebellious slave, is being trained at a gladiator school, and he falls in love with the slave Verinia. When she is bought by patrician Senator Crassus, Spartacus starts a revolt in which gladiators win their freedom. They free many other slaves to defeat armies led by Crassus's minion Glabrus. After this, they withdraw to the seaport of Brundisium in order to leave by pirate ships and return to their native countries. Crassus, trying to appear as the savior of Rome, leads the Roman Senate to vote to put down the revolt. Against the warnings of Senator Gracchus, he is voted commander-in-chief and first consul. Now the slaves are badly defeated by the overwhelming Roman forces. All survivors are crucified for not having betrayed their leader. Meanwhile, Crassus attempts in vain to win Verinia's heart. She escapes with the help of Gracchus. Once more, she sees Spartacus now hanging on the cross and shows him his son, whom she has given birth to and who she says will live a free man. That is as short a summary as I can provide. I did not write it.
Yeah.
Full.
Yeah.
I was just going to get, it was going to get muddled.
It would.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's a good short one.
But Titus not even mentioned in the summary.
Not.
So whoever wrote that just hates Peter Ustinov, obviously.
Who is great in this, honestly.
He's great. He won an Academy Award for this role.
He is the original person who buys Spartacus when Spartacus is working on the mines. And he owns the gladiator school.
Kind of campy vibe, and then has
kinda,
the emotional hammer sort of towards the end. He brings in the pathos, and it's interesting that it sort of all works anyway, even though it's not. There's a lot of different styles of acting, I guess, going on.
A lot of different styles of acting
is what I'm trying to say.
A lot of different styles of camera, like of cinematography, of mise en scène. A lot going on in this movie.
A lot going on.
You could tell there were two directors.
It's difficult anytime. So this, like I said, the fourth Kubrick we've done. Every time we've done one, it's like we could not even talk about the plot and just talk about all the weird stuff that happened around this movie, all the context, all the guys, all the names, where Kubrick was in his career, how he felt about how the movie was going.
Yeah.
And it's really tempting to always do that. But maybe an interesting place to start, because you haven't been on a Kubrick episode before, is where are you on Kubrick and his films?
Oh, I love Kubrick. I really, but I'm like, I love Eyes Wide Shut. It's probably my favorite Kubrick.
Yeah.
And then I've not seen all of them, but I love Eyes Wide Shut. I have not seen a Kubrick I don't love. Spartacus would be my least favorite of what I've seen.
Yes.
I've only not seen, I mean, if we're looking at like Paths of Glory as like his first major movie, I've not seen Paths of Glory. And then after that, I think I've seen everything. Right?
So it's this, Lolita.
I've not seen Lolita.
Yeah, I was going to say, because Lolita is my remaining blind spot.
That's my only other one. Yeah, but I've seen Full Metal Jacket. I've seen The Shining. I've seen Eyes Wide Shut.
Barry Lyndon?
2001. Barry Lyndon. Yep, I've seen.
Cool.
Yeah.
The other three we've done, I said we're in my top four. The other of that four is Barry Lyndon.
Yeah, which Brady just saw recently, but we haven't. He and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about it.
It's probably my favorite Kubrick. It's so good.
Yeah, it's great.
So good. We're gonna do it here.
Some similarities too. No, just in terms of like I think the visual language of the two movies.
Yeah.
Not in terms of like maybe the opposite thematically than this one. In terms of like a not a slave trying to free himself, but maybe like a lower class person trying to espouse to be a higher noble person.
Yeah, very similar. You're not wrong. Especially in like scope and
kind of
years covered.
Interestingly, not to talk about context, but like this is a contract film that Kubrick was on. Yep. Interesting to see Barry Lyndon as a movie that was like conceived and he had total artistic control over, as opposed to like this movie, which he did not have total artistic control over, but they're both epics in their own right.
Yeah. And even taking like the Kubrick out of it, we haven't talked about Kirk Douglas before, and he's a fascinating dude with a bizarre, unique career. He's under contract here. Kubrick is under contract, I should say, with Kirk Douglas. He's like under the Kirk Douglas contract, which is weird that Kirk Douglas has that. Or not weird, unique.
I mean, yeah, he fired Anthony Mann. Kirk Douglas is like, I don't want this guy to be the director.
Yeah, he hires Dalton Trumbo to write it. Depending on who you ask, he's very brave for doing that or not, or the credit's weird. He's credited to Sam Jackson in it because he was blacklisted. This movie maybe ends the Hollywood blacklist. So there's all this stuff outside of Kubrick you can talk about too. And I don't want to get too wrapped up in like the historical stuff because I just don't have it down, off the dome. And I just don't want to read Wikipedia at you either.
Yeah.
But
I will point out, I didn't read any of that stuff until afterwards, after watching the movie. So,
Same. I didn't know until afterwards what its critical, commercial, Oscars situation was either. It joins Avatar as a movie we've covered that was the highest grossing film in its release year.
Okay.
And I don't know if we've done any other movies, just this and Avatar now.
Okay.
And it was nominated for six Oscars, won 4, only of the big-ish category. I guess not even big-ish, but it doesn't get picture, it doesn't get a director nomination.
No.
Doesn't get a star nomination. Peter Ustinov wins for supporting actor.
Yep. And then costume and music.
Yeah.
And there was one other cinematography one. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it does look cool.
It looks great, but it's uneven.
Yeah. Yeah, there's friction.
Yes.
There's sometimes when they actually have, I think the number's 8,500 men in a scene.
Yeah.
Where there's guys coming over hills, and then there's other times where it's like, oh, very obvious matte painting, not that far behind Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
So
yeah, especially between Verinia and Spartacus, some of those scenes are quite obviously like studio set, painted background.
It's interesting. So the last movie we talked about, not you and I, but on the podcast, was Jason and the Argonauts, which comes out 3 years after this. And Brady and I were talking about the Ray Harryhausen creatures and art direction is really interesting. It's not trying to be realistic. It's trying to do a thing, and it's doing that thing really well. And it's convincing in the way some of the creatures are interacting with the actual live action characters is really impressive. But it still is a fairly journeyman style direction thing. Even though a lot of the special effects shots look cool, it's because the special effects are cool. It's not like the shots aren't as like interesting.
Yeah, special effects is the draw of the movie.
Yeah. And the acting isn't like, oh, that guy's doing a thing here. And then this movie happening a few years before it, it's like, oh, okay, here's like a whole different take on how movies can sound and look.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting in historical context to remember, like, even though this movie makes that much money, there's still like, creature epic kind of blockbustery things coming later that aren't necessarily as maybe, I don't know. It just feels so different, even though they're around the same time dealing with a similar thing.
Yeah. Same genre around the similar time. But I guess in that vein, it's like the difference between late 90s, early 2000s Gladiator and Troy, for instance, right? Or like, which, I was, my first impression watching this is just kind of like, they don't really make epics like this anymore, do they? Mm-mm. There's a different pacing to this. There's like
let Ridley Scott do it. They keep cutting his films.
That's true. Yeah. He desperately wants to make an epic like this, doesn't he? I didn't see Napoleon, but I think he is yearning to make his version of Spartacus.
We almost did Kingdom of Heaven before deciding that we just have to bite the bullet and do this. But I think he has like a 3 to 4 hour cut of Kingdom of Heaven that he says is like the definitive one.
I'm sure he does. I like Ridley Scott a lot.
Me too.
Wearing an alien shirt right now. For those of you watching on YouTube, thanks. But yeah, I mean, I guess like it's a movie that takes itself seriously, but also watching it now, 64 years after it was released. That feels unhealthy to say. It's like you could see the ways in which parts of it last. And I think, it's hard not to attribute those parts of it that kind of like still work today as being the Kubrick touches of it. But even just that point of like having 80 something thousand men in a scene and that epic scale of it, the crane shots, the kind of
the sets,
the kind of on set, on location shots. And then even the acting, like some of the just like interactions between two actors are just so well done, even if they're a different mode of acting than we see today. I think some of that carries through. And then there are other aspects of it that are so dated that it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's not part of like our hero epic journey anymore, is it? Like that's just not. Yeah, it's just not. It's not part of what we do anymore. But at the same time, at a moment in time right now when so many movies are 3 hours or longer, I felt like the pacing of this was so much better than some other 3-hour movies that come out today.
I'd agree. When I had to turn it off, when I had to pause it last night to break for a while, I was like, oh, I'm surprised. Going into it, I was like, oh my God, this is over 3 hours long. I just got to get going.
Yeah.
When I paused it and it was at an hour and a half, I was like, oh, that didn't feel like a full movie. Like we've done movies that are shorter than that on the podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, it felt actually well paced, well designed.
Yeah.
You know.
Very, very well paced. Very, like
there's interesting stuff happening.
Yeah. And very efficient. And also like, you know, I guess to get into it, if we want to break up, you know, I guess the start of it, which would be the mines until the rebellion, right, let's say. Like, I feel like the gladiator school and the blossoming romantic aspect of the story.
Yeah. You're there for like about an hour, I think.
You're like an hour and 15 minutes. It moves so quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very like enjoyable.
Yeah.
You know, I really like that about this movie because it pays off, I think, at the end, but it also is just like, it's so linear in that way where, you know, I'm thinking of other longer movies today that are just, I don't know, somewhere along the line, people lost the ability to tell a linear story in this fashion. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish they would, you know what I mean? Like, I know Chris Nolan's whole thing is time, but like, I wish you would tell a linear story, dude. Yeah. And I haven't seen Dunkirk, but I think they even do it in that too, right?
Dunkirk is, I mean, his main, the Chris Nolan project overall is he just is obsessed with time and the different ways to manipulate it. And yeah, Dunkirk goes beginning to end, but it's 3 different plots that it's cutting between that are all happening over a different time span, but are all given sort of even time in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think to go back to the gladiator school, right? Because like, I think part of what I was thinking a lot about this, like what makes that work so well? What makes it not feel like an hour and 15 minutes? What makes it,
you know, I think because it is such a, I almost said contrived, but it's such a standard plot. That piece of it especially.
Oh yeah, it's
standard.
It's so standard. It's so like, you know what's kind of occurring, right? Yeah. Like you know where we're going. The first 10 minutes establishes Spartacus as this rebellious slave. You know, like you kind of once Varinia is introduced to Spartacus, you understand that this is going to be a movie long romance. I think the part that really got me invested in it, and I'm not like a huge action person, but like the initial duel that like that is, you know, purchased and put forth, the scene when they're waiting, when Spartacus and Draba are waiting.
That guy got a Golden Globe nomination for this role.
Wow, really?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
he's good.
He's
in it,
really good,
but like very short.
It's a very small part.
Small part.
It's but effective.
Yeah, but that scene, I was like, okay, this is really well done, well conceived. You're not witnessing the fight before theirs. You're witnessing kind of their internalization of knowing they're going to have to go out and do this. It's shot really beautifully through the kind of the slots of the door, so you could see some action, but you're so intent on watching Spartacus look at Draba kind of like avoiding eye contact until almost the very end when the other gladiator is killed. And then that battle itself is shot so well.
Yeah, it really is.
It's where I feel like it's, for me at least, was so pleasing to watch. It kind of carries you through to the end of that gladiator school sequence.
Yes.
Because once Draba goes after is it Crocus?
Crosses.
Crossus. Yeah. Once Trumbo goes after Crossus, I'm gonna have to refer to the names. Apologies in advance.
Fine. You're fine.
Yeah. Once he goes after him, it's kind of all downhill from there, right? Like that's when, pretty soon after that, Spartacus is not killed because Trumbo is killed for going after the senator, and I'm just going to refer to him as the senator for the time being. And then
Crassus. Oh my God.
Crassus. Yeah. There you go. You're good. We're good. We could edit that.
I gave it a long A. Crassus.
So yeah, once Crassus is kind of almost attacked by the trident, then you're kind of quickly brought into the drama of the rebellion, and then from there it's pretty that's when it became a point where it's like I paused it and I was like, oh wow, they're already halfway through the movie. Almost.
Just about. There's I think a moment that you just described was the same moment for me when I was like, oh, okay, this is doing something that is a step above like Jason and the Argonauts. Wouldn't have had a scene like the one before Trumbo and Spartacus go out to fight, where they're just in that shed that's sort of like antechamber for the arena.
Yeah.
That I had thought to myself at the same time, like, that's cool. That's really cool. That's really like, yeah, you can feel the intensity, and there's no lines exchanged. We're just two guys like looking at each other or pointedly not looking at each other.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the fight I thought was really interesting. And we already referenced the rope or the net before, but a
lot of low angles.
Yeah.
Which I think does a lot in the way of connecting us with the gladiators, almost like putting us on a lower level than them, as opposed to having us watch it from the suite of Crassus and his,
Glabrus, the guy who doesn't have that big a part, but seems like he's going to be important.
Yeah, Glabrus, who seems he's going to be the son-in-law of Crassus.
Yeah,
and so you're not watching it from up there, right? You're watching it from below even the gladiators, and I think that very, very interesting. A lot of great blocking as well. Like the moment when the net is kind of like over the camera itself and you're watching it through the net. He gets a lot, like I guess the film does a lot in that point to immerse you as the viewer in the scene in a very like technical way, which I thought was great, and I thought really made up for some of the predictable aspects of that. Yeah, of the sequence, some of the kind of stock origin story of Spartacus.
Yeah. From this whole sequence, it's really just Spartacus, Varinia, and Batiatus, who stick around for the rest of the movie in any meaningful way. And Batiatus, Peter Ustinov's character, he sort of isn't in the movie for like the middle hour, more or less, either. No, he pops up every now and then just to do something pathetic.
Yeah, he's doing some kind of like,
come on, just help me out.
Yeah, we're both slimy, right?
Yeah. I loved all of their scenes.
They were great together.
They were great. Charles Laughton, who we haven't actually met the character yet, but we've seen a bust of him be hastily covered when Crassus gets to Batiatus's camp.
Yeah,
academy for gladiators.
Gladiator academy. Yes. Yeah.
That sequence is cool, and then he gets Crassus is buying Varinia from Batiatus. She's about to leave. The guard who's been mean, the one mean guard who had lines, just pushes Spartacus a little too far, and Spartacus drowns him in soup.
Soups him.
He gets souped. Yeah, he gets fully souped.
It's souped. Yeah.
And it sparks the rebellion.
He dies in the gruel.
And then, that's the spark that lights the rebellion, as Princess Leia would say in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. And then the movie gets a little muddy.
Time and geography are sort of just hand wavy.
Yeah.
From that point.
And Spartacus kind of like emerges as this master general.
Yeah. You don't know how long it's been, but the Roman Senate is like, oh, we got to do something about this guy.
Yeah, they really do a lot of work to try to. Yeah, the drama moves to Gracchus and Crassus.
Caesar's there.
Yep, Caesar is
Julius Caesar.
Julius Caesar is like a wedge between the two of them. Kind of, they're both vying for because Glabus. Or, did I say that right?
Glabrus or whatever.
So Glabrus is the first sent to squelch the rebellion,
which he thinks is a huge honor. And when he tells Crassus about
Crassus is like, you idiot.
Laurence Olivier has a great reaction.
Yeah.
Very probably, maybe not actually anachronistic, but it feels for this not the way you'd have a period written.
Yes.
A period piece written where he like yells at him and then goes, "Oh, sorry." Like that's how I react to good news or something like that. It's like extremely sarcastic all of a sudden.
Yeah. And so once Glabrus tries in vain to kind of stop Spartacus in his tracks.
He underestimates him. They're just slaves. They didn't build the moat.
Yep.
Should have built the moat.
And so from then on, Caesar becomes like a wedge character where both Gracchus and Crassus are trying to I guess woo allegiance for Julius Caesar. But at the same time, that's when time and geography get really muddy for the slave army rebellion.
Yes.
They keep kind of growing in their horde. But at the same time,
they put a down payment on a fleet of ships.
Yes. So they're as the summary mentioned, their master plan is to kind of flee Italy via these ships and return to their homes. And then we kind of trust that happens as they put a chest of gold and jewels as down payment. And then from there, the Senate becomes the main point of drama and action. Because Caesar is then replacing Glabrus's position as the kind of, I forget what the name of it is, but essentially
he takes command of the Roman garrison.
The garrison, yes. Yeah. So he is in command of the garrison, and then Crassus retires from the Senate, steps down briefly before
as part of the punishment for Glabrus's
failure.
Yeah. Just dumb stuff. He's like, since I sponsored this guy, I'll head out. And it's like it's a great political move. He gets himself more leverage and doesn't have to go to work for a little while. Gracchus calls it out immediately. That's when Charles Laughton plays Gracchus, turns on his English trained theater actor mode, which is cool when he and Laurence Olivier tap into that. And he's standing and he's sort of like booming in front of the Senate about this guy sucks. Don't be fooled.
Don't fall for this. This is actually a cowardly move on his behalf.
Right. Yeah.
He's not standing by himself and helping Rome when she most needs it.
Yeah.
And yada yada. But I feel like that's interesting that the turn happens at that point. You're good. Rome is calling.
Rome's? Yeah. Rome heard you were talking shit.
But yeah, I find that, and maybe it doesn't get muddy, but this is also when my viewing was interrupted the most. Because
it does. Because even for me, and maybe this is when I was interrupted too, because now I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know the intermission is right after they defeat Glabrus.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, he meets Antoninus, Tony Curtis's character, who is a singer.
It's singer, juggler, like entertainment.
He does magic. He does prop magic comedy.
Maybe side lover to Crassus.
Maybe. Yeah.
There was that interesting scene.
When I was thinking of the movie afterwards, I was like, I'm trying to remember when that scene happens, when Antoninus defects. Because I feel like he shows up in that scene where Spartacus is asking everybody, oh, what do you do? Oh, we can use a carpenter. Oh, what do you do? You did like admin work. We could use that. Oh, what do you do? Singing? Ha ha ha.
I juggle and I sing.
Yeah. And and the thing with Crassus definitely happened before. Fun also a scene that wasn't in the original. The version on Prime is the restoration, that is several minutes longer than the theatrical cut. One of the things that was cut from the theatrical cut was that scene with Crassus and Antoninus about oysters and snails. Because Crassus is like, I don't think it's weird to like oysters and snails.
Crassus
I happen to enjoy both.
Antoninus, do you like oysters? And he's like, surely I do when I have them. He's like, do you like snails? He's like, no, I don't eat snails. Are you opposed to eating snails? He's like, not quite. And then he's like, I think you could have oysters and snails whenever you would like. And then he's like kind of waxing poetic about oysters and snails and turns around and Antoninus is pieced out.
Yep.
Which apparently that's how easy it is to like escape as a slave in Rome.
Yeah, he was gone.
There's no, like, the next time you see him is, as you said, at this kind of camp.
And that was the sort of like, when did he get there? Was it dramatic? And I guess it wasn't. He sort of just walked out.
He was just like, I'm not going to have sex with you, dude. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Forget it.
He's like, I have limits as a slave.
I just like oysters. That scene cut by there were still multiple ethics committees, more or less, at this point in time in movies. They both hated it.
Makes sense.
And so that gets cut. In the restoration, they had lost the audio, so Tony Curtis was still alive. He does his voice. Laurence Olivier had died, but...
Ooh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, his widow remembers that Sir Anthony Hopkins could do a great Laurence Olivier impression, so that scene is Tony Hop coming in with the dub.
Wow.
Yes.
That's very interesting. I did not get that deep into reading about it.
Oh, I know. Yeah, you got to scroll down to the second page of Wikipedia. And Great Assault, that's from Wikipedia. But I thought it was fun enough to relay here, because anytime Anthony Hopkins is involved, I have to call it out. So.
Yeah. Also, that scene is weirdly extraneous. Like, I guess as an introduction, but it goes nowhere, right? Like, I guess, especially since Crassus's main, I mean, I guess it adds to the homoeroticism of Spartacus and Crassus.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not really explored elsewhere, other than the love triangle between Varinian and Spartacus. Yeah. Like, so I guess in that way, it does add to the drama of that, right? Yeah. That like there is a subversive reading in which Crassus is almost yearning for Spartacus.
Yeah.
And
there's sort of a parallel where, like, oh, I lost Antoninus to this guy. I'm going to try and take the woman that was in this guy's life, and that, well, she doesn't want me either. I lose her too, and yeah. I don't know.
But that's not explored all that much, and I guess you couldn't, right? Like at that point, you couldn't.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't let him do that back then.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting.
But they certainly did in ancient Rome.
They certainly did.
Yeah.
I think this is the first Tony Curtis we've ever done. It's the first Laurence Olivier we've ever done.
Oh, wow.
We've maybe talked about Tony Curtis in passing just through Jamie Lee Curtis, because we've done when we did Halloween. But speaking of Oscar snubs, Psycho is also the same year with Janet Leigh, his wife.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great. Could have been a really, I mean, it's still a great year for movies, I think, if you look at what does get rewarded, but because I think this is The Apartment.
Oh, wow.
Which
Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis then in Some Like It Hot.
Yeah. Anyway, all to say, Tony Curtis we haven't done before. One of the all-time Hollywood guys, I guess.
Yeah. He's good in this.
He is good in this.
Good, yeah.
He's good in this. What do you think of his poetry?
Is it Purple Woods and Blue Shadows, or Blue Woods and Purple Shadows? That's a bit in the movie. I thought it was lovely. His father taught it to him.
It's a really, I don't know. I like that scene.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're exploring the civilization that could be, so to speak, or, you know, like it's the kind of idyllic
It moves from his reciting it to the scenes of, kids in the field, and it's really
old people loving each other, questionable small men or babies, like not sure if they're trying to act like small people are children in this. I was a little confused about some of the...
It's one way around labor laws, I guess.
Yeah, is what it seemed like. But, but there's a lot of just trying to set the stage of Spartacus's benevolence, this free, what freedom does. Also, interesting to kind of read this movie around the civil rights movement. And, with the backdrop of, as you mentioned, the blacklist, maybe this movie being responsible for the blacklist ending because JFK, kind of crossed the picket line, so to speak, and viewed it.
Apparently Dalton Trumbo wanted it to be a metaphor for the Cold War also, which I don't see.
Don't see that.
I just don't see
but
it. I'm sorry.
But I definitely see... I guess if you are... metaphor for the Cold War, if you are...
everyone's no one gains anything and everyone just sort of dies.
If you're a very anti-United States perspective, whereas Rome is the analog for the US, I could see that maybe. Yeah.
Which could arguably be his natural angle as being anti-US government.
Sure, but at the same time, you're then kind of superimposing a Christ figure on what would be, Russian socialism, which kind of is antithetical to...
It doesn't feel like a perfect fit for the source material that they sort of have to hew. Not that they hew that closely to the historical record, but
yeah,
there still are certain things that happened that they do have to include in the movies.
Yeah, and interesting to look at this movie through the lens of civil rights era.
Yeah,
and what that kind of whole middle camp sequence, the traveling kind of army and the kind of growing community around said army, the involvement of the women and the kids and them kind of partaking in, I guess, believing in something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I made fun of the spark that lights the rebellion thing from Star Wars before, but there actually being a spark, a thing that they are hoping for, even knowing that whatever the odds are that it even exists or is possible are so slow or so low. And that's, I think, both in that poem there and then in Spartacus's speech when they have to turn back towards Rome, when they have been waylaid, when the ships are not delivered, when they can't.
Crassus outbids them for the ships.
Yeah. I think he even says, I don't know if it exists, what we're fighting for, but we have to fight.
Yeah. Which makes, then they do have this epic battle between Crassus, the Roman army, and the slave army. Which is, the battle itself is very interesting. They have these kind of rolling flames that they throw at the Roman soldiers, which is, I think epic in the sense of how it was shot and likely put a lot of the actors in danger. A little Kubrick flair, if you will. Yes. And
especially considering how many takes he probably made him do.
Exactly. And also what made me think a little bit of Barry Lyndon of okay, some of these battle sequences. I've not seen Paths of Glory. I'm interested now to see that as well. But even the ending of that, where they kind of abruptly end it and then they pan to all these kind of dead slaves and Roman soldiers. And then they kind of announce the victory of Crassus by Crassus coming through on his horse and making mention of wanting to know where Spartacus is, if he's alive, what he looks like. And that kind of ushers in, I guess, the final act of the movie.
As I don't know that it was a surprising shot where it went, but all the dead people on the battlefield that then like pans up and it's like the, oil painting style amount of people and dead bodies was, I thought, really affecting.
Yeah. Almost like a Bruegel painting. Like,
Seriously.
yeah.
And then you're pretty much through the end. It's the battle scene's interesting. It is a lot of, okay, trying to clock where have I seen, who's copied this exactly, what else has happened. And it's like, well, I guess there's a lot of epic war cinematography that Peter Jackson might have been using for Minas Tirith, but it feels like it might be this. I think especially when I forget which of the other armies comes in from the side, then I'm just like, oh, that's like the raw rim coming in, except they're the bad guys this time. Anyways, that's where my mind went.
No.
Just Lord of the Rings pilled, but obviously there's other movies between then and then that have battle scenes, but that's just where my head was.
Yeah, I haven't seen Braveheart in a long time, but I'm sure that was probably...
I'm sure was too.
Probably heavily... I mean, this is one of the watermark movies, right? For this, so...
Hugely successful. The most seen movie of the year that it came out in, which is kind of not that weird to me. It's got big stars in it, but, it is sort of weird to think of something like this as being... I guess a popcorn flick.
Yes, and also
I'm so curious, like what the mood was. Why, like, because it's not a super uplifting movie. But
no, it's actually quite the opposite, right? Like, I mean, I feel like
you could probably only show it like twice a day. It's over 3 hours.
Yeah, and I feel like the uplifting aspects are like the shoehorned. It's like the melodramatic aspects, I guess. So I guess they pander enough to those. Yeah. That kind of general sentiment of like unrequited or not unrequited, but like kind of what is the word I'm looking for? Like love that should not kind of persist yet finds a way to.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
They built that like the cake. They bake that into the cake enough.
Yeah.
I think to carry through, and
there's spectacle, obviously.
Yeah, there's spectacle, which I think always sells. There's Kirk Douglas's face, which I'm sure is honestly a draw, if I'm being honest. But
he's only 38 in this movie.
Ooh, yeah,
he was alive for almost 60 years after this, right?
Wow.
Because when did he die? He didn't die that long ago.
I don't know. Yeah, he didn't die that long ago, did he?
Didn't. He was really old.
But yeah, like I'm sure that was, and then I'm sure just
2020. So he was alive for 60 more years after this. His face already looked like that.
Yeah. And I think part of it was just like, I imagine another part of it is just, it's the genre, to go back to that point, it's not a genre I really think of or kind of identified as a genre. It's kind of like, Roman movies, right? I didn't think of like sword and sandal as a term, I suppose. But enough, it's one of those genres that I think we can easily say has been replaced by the superhero movie.
Yes.
So like 300 maybe being the last successful version, which debatably is a it's a graphic novel adaptation.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't think that Gladiator 2 is tracking to be, like the top film of the year or anything. No. We'll see, I guess, by the time this episode comes out. But it would be a surprise. That's a good read on it. It actually sort of has everything for everyone. It feels like Titanic has, you got romance and you got drama, and then in the last hour you've got all that action. Yeah,
I mean, Braveheart was like a super successful movie.
This is true.
And maybe Braveheart was this without the romance. You know what I mean? Like, so of the time, I guess it fits. It's not totally obscene that it was like the biggest draw. But it's certainly, it's a movie that has always been on the periphery of movies that I, obviously aware of Spartacus as a name and I Am Spartacus, but never truly one that I'm late to insofar as like, I don't think I would have sat down and watched it if not for doing this.
Same. Which is why this podcast exists, I guess.
And I'm not unhappy I watched it. You know what I mean? Like
neither am I.
And especially like I like Kubrick a lot.
I would have gotten more sleep if I hadn't watched it. But.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess maybe we could talk about the final sequence because I do like the final sequencing of the movie.
So we should say we've sort of gotten up to where he gets captured and then it feels like the movie's over. There's about 40 minutes left after that.
Yeah, 30, 40 minutes-ish.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. There's a lengthy credit sequence. Yeah. So it's probably 30-ish minutes of actual action. But the I Am Spartacus scene I knew was coming and I figured was about to happen then. Still really, really works in context. It really plays if you've watched the first 2 hours and change.
Yeah. So Crassus wants to know, like, I forget exactly how it goes. He'll grant. None of you won't
you
die.
Go back to being slaves, but you won't be crucified. Just tell me which one of you is Spartacus.
And then Tony Curtis stands up and says, I am Spartacus. And then, of course, the chorus says, I'm Spartacus. And then he literally says, I'm going to crucify them all. And then he does. He follows through with that. They're all crucified on the way to Rome.
There's a great, I don't even know if he's stone-faced. Whatever Kirk Douglas's face does, it's completely unmoving, but he just has like a single tear down his cheek. Yeah. It's like, shit, that works.
Yeah,
it just works.
It does. And then,
that's killer movie making.
Yeah. And then you see one of the few close-ups of the movie too.
Yeah.
Outside of Gracchus lovingly laying on his side, which... it's like he's getting ready for his colonoscopy. It was great.
The camera loves Charles Laughton.
I love Charles Laughton. I want to watch more Charles Laughton.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just have to make mention. I have to plug my boy for a second because he's great in this masterclass, and he does an about face in the end too.
Yes, it's surprising that we mentioned Ustinov as Batiatus comes around to having some like actual pathos, and he's been a little apart from the vibe that everyone else has of like the slave owners or the senators, of sort of having like a little bit more humanity. Like, oh, he really didn't want him to fight to the death back at the beginning.
Yeah. He's like, we don't kill gladiators here. Yeah. We just, I sell them and then the owners can do whatever they wish. And then he kind of acquiesces and does it. And lo and behold, I think this is a little bit too of like, they're using the term Italy in the movie, but at the same time, there are aspects of the movie that clearly show the difference between Rome as a separate city-state than other parts, surrounding areas. Yeah. And Capua is where...
back in Capua, this is not how we do things. This is not
how we do things in Capua. Capua, we like to live lavishly. Yeah. My gladiators are treated well and they get women even, and it's like... Yeah. Sure.
But to your point, so he's already a little bit apart, has kind of an about face at the end. Charles Laughton as Gracchus has like he sees the writing on the wall and kind of just like takes it, whatever, fine.
Yeah, he's like, I'll spare Verinian and the child.
Yep.
Here are some papers.
Yes.
Papers small enough to befit the child as well.
Yep.
And then
part of it is because he knows it'll piss Crassus off and he thinks that's funny.
Yes.
He specifically says doing this to annoy Crassus.
And then,
but it's also kind of like,
there's a little bit of like part of it to piss off Crassus and part of it to like,
there's a great scene of Laughton and Ustinov before that where they're planning to like go kidnap, so to speak, or save, depending how you look at it, Verinia, and turns out the baby. And Ustinov saying like, basically, I have a conscience now, and they're both like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
How unfortunate for you.
Yeah, you have dignity and a conscience.
Yeah, the whole thing they say about dignity, it's like, oh, it's a great scene.
But it's also, I think, if you're looking at Gracchus's turn, it's because he recognizes Crassus wants to be a dictator, and he for all of his kind of griminess, he is at heart like a Roman in the sense of he will do things as he feels a Roman does things, which is, praise the gods in public, don't believe in them in private. Mm-hmm. There could always be a deal done. He negotiates with terrorists. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a part of me watching this movie in our current political climate and being like, okay, this guy's like a Dick Cheney Republican as opposed to the Donald Trump Crassus Republican.
Yeah. This is a Republican that can integrate into polite society.
This is a Republican who just wants more money.
Their words. They're the ones always talking about the Republic.
Yeah, right. So I feel like in the context, it's not just pissing off Crassus as like an individual, but it's also what he stands for, which is dictatorship and that weird going back to the narration that opens the movie, right? And about Rome at the time, pre-Christianity.
2,000 years before slavery would end, he dreamed of the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I forgot there was narration at the beginning until you mentioned that just now.
Yeah,
but it's there.
It's the only time.
It's the only time.
Again,
those first 10 minutes, not by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, and so then to also maybe try to make more sense of the oyster snail conversation. It's Antonius, right? Yeah. Antonius and Spartacus are told to fight to the death.
Let's see if this myth of slave brotherhood really exists.
Yeah, and initially it was supposed to be in the arena of his ancestors. Mm-hmm. And Crassus is so upset and incited that he wants to do it then and now in front of the soldiers at the gates at nighttime. So he has them duel, and he tells whoever doesn't die is going to be crucified. Mm-hmm. So then it becomes this, like pretty moving battle between the two of them, in which they're both kind of willing to die for the other. And Spartacus ultimately kills Antonius. Mm-hmm. And so we know Spartacus's fate afterwards, which coincides with Verinia being taken out of the city. And then we have this kind of moving scene at the end where Spartacus is crucified.
They've both been led to believe the other one's already dead.
Yes.
Pretty much.
And Spartacus has not seen his son. Or his baby. He doesn't know it's a son. He assumes it's a son. She says, or a daughter. And he's like, I'm not listening. And then this is back at the camp.
Who he at best assumes he will never see his kid if the kid survived.
Yes. Yeah. And he does see his kid, which I guess is the uplifting aspect of the end of the movie. Yeah,
like you said, or like that summary said, like, oh, that son is free and he will be born free.
And that's what she says to him.
Yeah.
And in that book too, not to kind of, this isn't my thing, but there's an essay about the mise-en-scène in the movie. And they talk about that final scene.
It is. Yeah. Keep talking.
Because it's one of the only scenes where you're looking at the three of them from behind Spartacus. So Spartacus is crucified and there's a shot above Spartacus where he's in the foreground and Verinia and their son are in the mid between the two of them, which it's unlike a lot of the scenes in the movie in which most of these are told from the perspective or normally that shot, if it were to fall in line with some of the other shots, would be placed from Spartacus's perspective. Mm-hmm. But instead we're kind of looking at it from above Spartacus, which I thought was like, okay, yeah, I see that. Like that's an interesting kind of visual representation of something being some resolution coming at the end of that in that scene. And then she kind of kisses his feet and we get a close up of that. And then she goes back on the little buggy and they go off, presumably to be free.
Yeah. And Finn, as we were saying that, remember, we haven't mentioned Gene Simmons plays Verinia. This is well after she gets an Academy Award nomination for a 40s version of Hamlet. Yeah. Golden Globe nomination for Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, a lot of great actors and actresses in this.
Just
a lot of
just lousy with
stage people.
Stage people and
Yeah.
And it's a cool mix of different styles of stuff.
Yeah.
Of stuff.
And I would say Kirk Douglas might be the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah, it's always, I think what he has to do, it's not as show-offy, it's not as fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who are doing things in this that are fun. All the Romans.
Yeah, all the senators. All the senators
Titus gets to have fun.
Yeah. But, I don't know how much Kirk Douglas gets to have fun.
I don't know if the romance is super sold.
No, and like I said, I feel like that's kind of like
it doesn't feel like it's that
baked into it
Yeah.
for an audience, not necessarily for the story.
No.
But it does pay off a little bit at the end. I do feel like
it's a touching scene.
It pays off insofar as like Varney is a fictional character amongst some historical characters, and I suppose if you're going to write a fictional character, to have that fictional character try to make a movie uplifting that otherwise would not be, it works.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is Please Die My Love the last line of the movie?
It might be, actually.
Yeah.
It might be.
Speaking of uplifting endings.
Yeah.
I feel like Ustinov is doing, even not being part of that direct connection of Spartacus seeing his son, but Ustinov in the background trying to negotiate his way through this and just kind of being like, come on.
Yeah, he's like, this is my sister-in-law. Yes, my sister-in-law.
And just the way he plays that, it just feels like there's a lot of the emotional weight of the scene is weirdly on him in the background, like
being
providing some of that space.
His anxiety and nervousness of that, where she's just like goes right up, and
can't blame her at all.
I think the last lines of the movie might be just time I love. And I was going to say, there's no loitering here.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just like, please have mercy. Just get in the carriage.
Yes.
We have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cool movie.
Yeah. I'm glad I watched it.
Me too.
I'm no regrets here.
No regrets.
I'm glad I watched it over Kingdom of Heaven, because questionable how much I would have enjoyed Kingdom of Heaven.
You would have had an hour more of your life back, but
yeah, but
I agree. I think that was an hour well spent.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get to ratings.
Yeah.
On a scale of 0.5 to 5, on any scale of your choosing, what would you give Stanley Kubrick's 1960 blockbuster, Spartacus?
3.5 eggs to the face out of 5.
Again, a magician that does prop comedy. That's even back in these days.
Yeah.
An invaluable part of a general's,
humanization,
inner circle.
Yeah. There's a scene where Antonius has an egg and hands it to Spartacus, and he like smashes it on his head, and then he has a good old romp, laugh. Right. It's a great little bit of physical comedy in this.
And again, rule of threes for comedy. The third beat, the first two beats, he has done a magic trick where an egg opens and a bird flies away, and then he gives one to Varinia. She opens it, the bird flies away, and Spartacus is like, I'm not letting my get away. He opens his egg. Egg goes all over his face.
Yoked in the face. Yeah. So
it's a callback to when he drowned that guy in Gruel.
Yeah. I saw that and I was like, that's going to be my rating system.
That's good. 4 out of 5 accurate pronunciations of Spartacus, I'd say. Hadn't mentioned Spartacus or Clueless yet in this podcast. So
Spartacus.
That is
from Clue, yeah.
Yep. That was my first time.
I have a thing for Tony Curtis. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The first time I was ever...
Speaking of cake.
Yeah, he's a cake boy.
I love Clueless so much. Yeah.
The first time I'd ever seen anything from Spartacus was probably in Clueless.
Yeah.
And let's get to our monthly question. Very simple this month. Sword or sandals?
Sandals.
You're the first one. Can you elaborate? Everyone else has said sword so far. Not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, I'm a lover, I'm a pacifist at heart.
Yeah.
So
I think Brady said he just hates seeing feet.
Okay, Brady.
Which is not surprising.
Yeah. I'm sandals. Also swords, just
pointy.
I think of like heavy. Weight guys who think of the way they know the way of the sword or something. Think of my brother-in-law who has fucking swords over his door frame.
Yeah.
Because he's a dork.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you have
I'll
like
tell you how I really
Tivas
feel.
crossed over your door frame, right?
I do have some Tivas, not
Yeah,
on
there
my
you go.
door frame, but on my porch. I'll take a Tiva over a sword any day.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Well, Patrick, thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank
It
you.
was fun. This was a big movie and a lot of different senses of the word to cross off our list here.
Yeah, and I think fitting for late to the movie.
Absolutely. We both were on this one. It's always
Yeah.
nice when that can happen. All right. Well, you can find stuff on Linktree, linktr.ee/late to the movies, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.